Everything I needed to know about starting a business I learned as a kid. Hi, this is Jim Gibson with Business Sense Podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm going to tell you a story. I hope you find it interesting. I guess I was about 10 years old, maybe 12 at the most. Don't remember the exact details. And I grew up in Philadelphia. And it was summer. And summer for me was hanging out with my 5 or 6 friends, sort of like that movie The Sandlot. And we just had a great time, and we'd just do all sorts of things. Nothing evil, of course, but just had fun all day long. And then one day we came upon noises and bulldozers and work being done and everything else, and we went closer and saw that they were building houses. And this was going to be later, it was going to be called Morrell Park. And it was probably a couple hundred houses. There's a lot of homes. But, a bunch of boys watching construction. We were fascinated with that and watched it all day long. And eventually my friends got tired of watching the construction, and I did not. I got closer, so I decided I would get as close as I could to the work until I was told to leave or get away, go away. And, you'd have the bulldozers, and they would start out, and they would level, some land and everything else and get everything ready. And then next, the backhoes would come in and dig trenches for the sewers and the water feed and the electricity. And then next, the cement trucks would come in and lay the foundation, the slab foundation, or in that case, I think we had cellars. And then the carpenters would come in and do their job, and then the plumbers and then electricians and the roofers and everything else. So, and they would do one house and then move to the next and to the next and to the next. And these were hundreds of houses. This was a big neighborhood that was being built. And it was thoroughly interesting to me. I enjoyed watching. And I got to know some of the carpenters. I watched them build the walls and how they would lift them, build them on the floor and lift them up, and how they would do different things and what was involved. And I'd watch the plumbers and electricians. And I got to know some of them as a kid and everything else. And then what would happen is during the day around 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, what would happen? Well, the roach coach would come, and he'd come 3 or 4 times, maybe more a day. I don't remember exactly. But, everyone would stop work and they would go out to the roach coach and they'd stand in line and they would get whatever they needed. And of course, in Philly during the summer, it can get up into the 90s. And it could also get up into 80, 90% humidity. So everyone was sweating. I was sweating. Everyone was sweating. Everyone would get thirsty. And so one time I stood in line and I decided I was going to get a soda. I had some coins in my pocket. So I asked for a Coke. And the guy said something like 25 cents. And I said, 25 cents for a Coke? That's outrageous. I just want a regular Coke. I don't want to buy a whole case of them. And so at any rate, that was his going price, 25 cents. So I purchased the Coke at 25 cents, outrageous. You could go a half mile down the road and you could buy it at the local corner store for about a dime, I think, at the time. And I thought that was crazy. Then I got an idea. Why don't I sell soda? I could sell it for a lot less. And I know I can make a profit at this. So there was my idea. I was going to be a soda salesman. So the first thing I did is I figured out how much does it cost to get a case of soda from the beverage store. Now, the beverage store in Philadelphia at that time was a lot like Costco. You bought it in bulk. So I figured out how much it would cost to buy a case. And I could actually sell it. If he was selling it for 10 cents, I could sell it for 15. Easily sell it for 15. I would never sell it for 25, though. As the roach coach was selling it, and the corner store was 10, I could buy it for 5 cents and sell it for 15. That was a 200% profit. That was outrageous profit. That was great. But I didn't stop there. What I did was I decided I would just buy one case. And so I talked my dad into going to the beverage store, and I gave him the money. I never borrowed money from my parents to start a business. In fact, I've never borrowed money from anybody to start any of my businesses. So I gave him, a couple dollars to buy a case. We put the case in the back of his car and went home. He had no idea what I was doing, but I'm sure he figured out I had some sort of plan. And I put that case in our cooler. Not that we ever went camping or picnicking. I don't think we ever used the cooler. Then I put the cooler in the back of a wagon. And then I tied the wagon to the back of my bike, put some signs on the side of the cooler that said, Coke, 15 cents. And I went down to the construction site, and I would say I only went like a block or two, and my case of Coke was sold for 15 cents. Man, this is a great idea. So I went home, and I bought a couple cases. I took my profits from the first case, bought 3 cases. I don't know exactly how many, but I bought, I bought the cases I could afford to buy. So 100% turnover. And so I went back down and I sold those out within an hour. So I went home and I said, I got to stay ahead of this Roach Coach guy. I can't be behind them because no one's interested in buying soda once they've already quenched their thirst. So I followed the Roach Coach all day. I had a little map figured out, put the time in that he showed up at certain intersections, how long he would be at each stop, things like that. And I decided that I needed to be about 15 minutes ahead of him. Don't want to be too far ahead. Don't want to be too far behind. So I was 15 minutes ahead. So next day I got out there, 10 o'clock in the morning, this ice cold Coke and also cream soda. Cream soda is great when you're in Philly. I don't know if I've gotten it anywhere else, but cream soda and Coca-Cola and stuff like that. Put the sign on the side of the wagon, 15 cents Coke. And I would say it lasted about 2 hours, and I was completely sold out. And, of course, I did the same thing. I went back, got my dad, take me to the beverage store, bought all the beverage I possibly could on all the profits that I made that day, and went out the next day and spent, a good half of the day. And then I repeated the same thing, and then pretty soon I'm out there 6 hours a day selling sodas at a reduced price. I got so involved in selling these sodas at a reduced price and making so much profit that I decided to invest a little bit in my company. And what I did was I went out and I got one of those little change machines. I don't even see them anymore that connect to your belts. Maybe if you're an older generation, you remember those. That a lot of times the paper boys who selling papers on the corner would have them. And if someone gave you $1, you could click a couple clicks, and it had you just would dispense the money quickly. That was the point. Dispense the money quickly. And I invested in one of those, and life went great. Again, I probably made more money than my dad working for the city of Philadelphia made all the same time he was out working. And then you guessed it, I got caught. I got caught by the Roach Coach. He figured something was going on because his profits were way down. People weren't buying soda. He probably asked, and someone said, I bought it from the kid about 10 minutes ago. And so he got wise of that, and he caught me. And he grabbed me by the scuff of the neck, and he made threats, bodily threats, to a 10-year-old of what he was going to do to me if he ever caught me selling sodas again in his neighborhood. Well, it was probably, I spent, 6 weeks or so doing this, and I decided I had enough money, and I didn't want to do this anymore. I wanted to enjoy the summer, and so that was the end of my Coke business. Well, in doing this small business, I've learned certain things as a kid. Didn't realize I was learning these principles, didn't know I used these principles, but they really worked for me, and they've worked ever since. And the first thing you have to realize is opportunities are all around you. Open your eyes. There's opportunities all around you. Some people are naysayers, and all they say is, that'll never work. Oh, this will never work. Oh, that's a silly idea. Or if it was a good idea, someone would have done it already. But the reality is there's opportunities all around you. Look at them. See what needs you can meet. See what services you can provide that other people aren't providing. The next point is get a plan. Think it through. How are you going to do this? At least start a preliminary plan on how you plan to, institute your ideas, your concepts and all. But be proactive. Think it through. The third thing is test your idea. And I did that with that one case. I started out with a case. So if it didn't work, I had a case of Coke. Maybe I could give it out to my friends. Maybe I could give it to my family. Maybe I could sell it. I don't know. But I was pretty sure it was going to work. But I didn't invest everything. I didn't go wholehearted and if you're out there and you're working at a job and you decide you're going to start your own business, I didn't quit my business, so say. I decided that I would limit my risk and I would buy one case to start with and see if the concept was going to work. Now, remember in the previous podcast about that employee of mine that decided to go cold turkey. He was 100% committed, and he was going to go out the next day and start everything. And I'm sure that the day after he quit, he sat there and stared at the phone and wondered why it wasn't ringing. Well, you got to test your ideas first, and you got to minimize your exposure, your risk. So the second thing is test your ideas. So first is opportunities are all around you. Open your eyes, pay attention. 2 is get a plan. 3rd is test your ideas. Now 4 is complete a plan. So once you've done your preliminaries, you look through, you tried it a couple different ways and everything else, and you realize, hey, this is probably going to work. This is probably a good concept, and I'm getting a decent response. And so I'm going to complete the plan. Now I'm going to fill in the details because I learned a little bit. I learned that there was, like when I was pulling that wagon along with the bike, I realized that I could only sell so much in this one little cooler I had. So, I realized I'd have to make multiple trips each day to maximize my efforts. And I realized it was a good idea, but, there's other things involved. I went out and I followed the Roach coach to make sure I was ahead of him, not behind him, because that would have been silly to be behind him. I wouldn't have sold anything. Getting ahead of him, I'd sell everything. So I completed my plan. I had my map. I knew what I was going to do and when I was going to do it. I knew the timing, everything else. I knew where he was going to be at any certain time of the day. So I completed the plan. And then 5th, the most important part is do it. Stop thinking about it. If it's a good idea and you've planned it and you've tested it and everything else and you know it's going to work, then do it. Now, when I started businesses, when I started Nova Voice and Data, I didn't jump in the first time. What I did was I worked nights and weekends until I knew I had enough income that I could support my family. So I minimized the risk. And then when I knew that was going to happen, then I put my resignation in with Burlington Air Express. Years later, as a Marine Corps officer, the Marine Corps taught me a little saying. It was BAMSIS. It doesn't mean anything. It's just an acronym. But it taught me that there are certain things that you do when you're given an operation, once you're given a goal that you have to reach. And it stands for, or actually it spells BAMCIS. So it says begin the plan. The second is arrange for a recon. Now, in civilian life, that would mean go do your homework. Go research things. Go check it out to make sure it's true. And then the next one, the M, would be make the recon. That would mean actually go to the library, talk to people, things like that. So you're beginning to plan, you're arranging, you're thinking through how am I going to do my research to get the facts down, to make sure I don't do something stupid. In the Marine Corps, that would mean looking at maps, things like that. But in business world, that would mean checking all different things to make sure that your concept is a good concept. And then the recon would be testing the waters type of thing, like I did with the one case. I didn't buy 10 cases at the beginning. I bought one case. And then complete the plan. Come up with all the details now that you've done your research, that you've done your homework. You complete the plan. And then the I is issue orders. Well, in this case, there was no issuing orders. It was just me. But if you have employees and you're thinking of doing something, other than what you're doing right now, and you want to add something to your business, well, then you're going to have to start training your people on the new process, the new idea, the new equipment that you're going to have. And then, of course, the last is supervise. That's only if you have employees, or I guess if you're by yourself, it's discipline to do the plan. But these things really work well. And a lot of people get in trouble is when they decide they're just going to go out and just do something. It's a great idea. Let's go do it. No, that's where you're going to fail, man. That's where you're going to be 9 out of 10 failures in the first 5 years. If you want to be successful, you got to put in your homework. But if you want to be successful, you also have to do it. You have to accomplish the task. You have to start it. You have to do something like that. Now, I didn't know those things as a kid. It just seemed natural to me. I had maybe a couple dollars in my pocket. I did not want to waste it. I did not want to borrow money. Sometimes you borrow the money, you waste it. Sometimes when you got a lot of money, you waste it. That's why I've been saying in the past, sometimes it's good to start with nothing because you're not going to waste any money. I'm not saying that's the only way to start a business. If you're disciplined enough and you know enough about business that you can go in there and take the resources that you have and spin something up with employees and everything else in a short time frame, fantastic. But if you don't have experience in business, that's not necessarily a good idea. You're going to waste a lot of money. Where if you don't have the money, you don't have the resources, it makes you sit down and think, how do I solve this problem with the resources I have, which are limited? And that thinking is going to cause you to make better decisions. It's going to make you reflect when you make mistakes that you don't make the same mistake twice. Sometimes I have seen in business, because I've seen a lot of people start businesses. When you're a business to business, especially if you're selling cabling and you're selling IT services and you're selling equipment, telephone equipment and servers and things like that, you get a feel for businesses if they're going to be successful. And if you go in and you're talking to a business owner who's starting a new business and he's all enthused and everything else, as you should be if you're starting a new business. Maybe you should be a little bit concerned too. But I noticed that there's some people who thought things through very clearly. And when I would talk to them, they would listen very closely to my advice concerning how to do this or that. They were concerned how much it was going to cost and what the value of the product they were going to receive. Those who were frivolous said, well, whatever, just do the work and send me the check. Send me the invoice. Well, those were the ones who I had doubts that were going to be successful. So that's why I say if you don't have a lot of money, maybe that's the best place to start. Do it on the weekends. Do it in the evenings. Test the idea out over and over and over again. Think about that BAMSIS. That's a Marine Corps way to remember how to accomplish a task with people. So if you have a business and you have employees and you want to accomplish a task, maybe that's the way to do it, is using BAMSIS, because a lot of that deals with issuing orders and supervising. Now, there are some principles that I learned also as a kid that I followed through in my other businesses. And the principles were this: is know your customers. I knew my customers. I knew these were thirsty tradesmen who were sitting out in the sun beating on their head, working in high humidity. I know they're going to want to drink sodas and stuff like that. So I knew my customers. The second thing is I knew my competition. I knew my competition was gouging. And I also knew the market, that the market was 10 cents for a bottle of Coke. It wasn't 25 cents. And I remember a situation with one of my employees years ago. He was saying, why don't you charge more for this product you sell on cable supply? And I said, I bet you I could. I said, how much more? He said, I don't know, why don't you charge $5 more? I said, $5 more? Why don't we just make it 10? He said, yeah, that'd be a great idea. I said, heck with 10, let's make it 1,000. And he said, well, I don't think anyone would buy it. And I said, that's the point. I could charge more. But it's not just charging more, it's making sure you're delivering a fair product at a fair price, and then you'll have customers. If you're charging too much, you won't have customers. It's more important to sell 10 at $10 each than it is to sell 2 at $20 each. So you got to know your competition. You got to know your market. And that's what the Roach coach didn't know. So it was easy to pull his customers away. Now, last was count the cost. So, I did that recon. I went and figured out the price of a bottle of Coke or a can of Coke or whatever it was back then in the 60s. And I knew what my costs were going to be. That really, just buying a case of Coke, and my dad was going to drive me there for free. And, of course, he got tired of driving me, to be honest with you. I think that was another excuse to end it. He did not want to drive me every day to the Container Store. But I counted the cost. So my cost was my time I put in, filling up the bike every day with the ice chest full of soda 2 or 3 times a day. And lastly, remember that some things have time limits to them. In other words, I knew that this was only going to be for a couple of weeks because it was the summer and these houses were going to be built. I had to go back to school in a month or 2. So it was a time limit. There was an opportunity time for it. Sometimes people wait for so long to do something that they lose the opportunity because other people have already seized it. And then what they want to do is become a commodity to the point to where you're struggling over a small percentage of the profit. So there's always that time limit. There's a season. For me it was a summer. That was it. I didn't contemplate it for 6 weeks and then decide, maybe I'll just give it a try. No, I jumped right on it. And I tested it right away. And as soon as I knew it was going to work, then I went out there as a kid and I sold as much sodas as I possibly could. So I learned a lot as a kid about business. It served me well over this time period. And I've started other businesses that have been successful because I've learned my lesson. I've done some things as a kid that didn't work out as a business. I had a couple businesses that just didn't work out. Now, I've always made money at them, but they just didn't work out. So I've learned from experience as a kid. And these are some things you should consider. If you're thinking of going into the IT business, man, think about the market, think about the cost. But I know one thing, that thinking about it forever never accomplishes anything. Again, this is Jim Gibson with Business Sense. Thank you for listening to my podcast. You have a great day.